Hi, I'm Noah Daniel. I am so grateful for the platform to talk about making a difference in my classroom, and I've been so lucky to be sharing my projects outside my school this past year and hearing that these projects that I'm going to be talking about and my approach building outside the blocks is making a difference for students in classrooms across North America, little by little, and even a bit overseas. This is a bit of Bob. The first thing that happened when this began for me was I wanted to figure out how to use the little time that I had. I was always worried about how I was going to be able to teach students in the amount of time that I was given. And then I worried about how I was going to be able to teach all the individuals in my classroom. And then I thought, well, I have all these individuals in the classroom. There must be something more I can make of this collection to really become a community. And over many years, I was creating projects that helped bring all of those factors to the forefront, meet individual learning needs, build a community in minimal class time. And I had an incredible mentor who asked me 6 years ago, what's this thing that I was doing in my classes? And I said really casually, I don't know, it's like I'm building outside the blocks. And for a month, I met with her weekly and we unpacked what this was. And it turned out that there were common elements in all the projects that I'd been doing for like a decade. And I said to her, yeah, it's actually called building outside the blocks. And over the last year, I really defined it. So building outside the blocks is an approach that uses personalizing projects to help students build skill, autonomy, and community in minimal class time. And I'm going to introduce some of my projects because they're great projects. I really love them. They engage the students. But I'll explain to you that really any project can become a Bob. So what's in a name? The win, where students introduce themselves, the etymology of their name, they find out from their parents why they were named that, and they have the critical task of determining whether or not their name actually reflects who they are. History Beats is where you take a song, look up the historical context, research in terms of is the history in line with the song, to what degree do the lyrics and music work together to send a message, and of course, is it something that you have more questions about that you want to pursue or meaning that you want to derive from it. T-Talk is my version of Genius Hour, where I took sustainability and I used the opportunity to have the students pitch an idea and then blog about it, create an action plan, and then eventually present a 5-minute TED Talk. Precious Cargo I actually saw as a homework assignment where students had to choose one thing that they would take with them if they were emigrating to another country. And when I saw it as a homework assignment, I was thinking, well, maybe that would be better as a Bob, because when it's presented to the whole class, really makes a difference. And last year and this year, I can't even tell you the kind of community that we created about it. But if I had more time, I would tell you. Your deeds are your monuments. My students would read a book, a biography, an autobiography about somebody who made a difference, and then they created a monument in their honor and presented them. The extra I took from Stephen Covey's 21 Days to Success, and students commit to making a change, to start doing or stop doing something. They journal about it for 3 weeks, and then they create something that's reflective of what they accomplished. And Curator is where there's lots of things you can do. I actually helped somebody develop this for their science class. They were looking at different people who had created cures for things. But I was thinking about how any kind of curation could be a wonderful activity for students to do independently and drive their own learning and then present to the class. And then whatchamacallit is where students make up a word, they write the dictionary definition of what that word is, and they try to make it sticky. So I took it from the tipping point, and they used different strategies to try to get kids to put it into their vernacular, and then they present about it. But one-off Bobs are one kind of project. My favorite projects that I've never seen other people do, those are called tri-Bobs. And the idea is revisiting a project 3 times over an entire school year and adding a layer to it. So the PS series begins with a portrait of yourself, evolves to a personal soundtrack, and then the last stage, photosynthesis, comes from a year of decoding photographs, and then the students take a photograph and lead the decoding of that text. Master Storyteller I've done with grade 4 and grade 6, and it's one of my absolute favorites. I can't get over what's going on in grade 4 this year and what I've seen happen in grade 6. But essentially you go from reading a picture book to the class to telling the story to the class using visuals to writing your own original story. So it gives the students an entire year to build skills for storytelling, but it also allows them to have explicit instruction in writing, in revising, etc., through the whole writing process. And then by the end, when they do present their stories, they feel really comfortable because they've done that before. Did you knows I created for science when I had to teach science, when I had never taught science before, and like grade 7 and 8 science. I was really nervous, so I created Did You Know? And the Did You Knows were ways that students could investigate, let's say, a pure substance or a mixture, like in grade 7, and they would present on it, and they would do it from an area of interest. So one student would look at antiseptic, and another student would look at our favorite perfume, and another would look into baking, and they would present on it, but deepen their understanding of a pure substance or mixture. The What's News, What's Up, and News and Schmooze is something I've been able to scaffold over the entire middle school because I teach grades 6, 7, and 8, NYP 1, 2, and 3 in a middle years program of an IB school. So What's News is an introduction to news, and they revisit it multiple times. The What's Up begins with an analysis of an article, annotating it, presenting on it, explaining their choice, and then evolves to adding a visual and then decoding just a photograph based on 2 versions of the same story written from different perspectives or different newspapers. And then News and Schmooze are where the students are in groups but are individually accountable because they're looking up a subject that they agree on. They're having a conversation about it in front of the class and in front of video, and then they feed back to themselves what their next steps are in terms of preparing to talk about a new current event and engage in the conversation itself and collaborate. So that goes through 3 stages. The first News and Schmooze, News, Schmooze, and Tableaus 2, and News, Schmooze, and Produce. And all of these projects have a theory behind them. And the theory is that if you take all the best ideas in education, you can actually make them happen through a project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea that these projects feed me so much information about my students that I really get to know them, and I use that data to teach them other things. I use that data to scaffold their learning over the years and really support them. And I give them formative feedback that I help track that is not just about the content or the skill, it's really about who they are and what they can bring to the table. You know, giving them opportunities to be successful. Skills. So every single building outside the blocks project can be completely different. And I've helped people do it for science classes, do it for social studies classes, do it for language and literature, but all of them have reading, writing, presentation skills, listening skills, because the class is a community, which I'll explain in a minute. They all invite creative and critical thinking. They all help to build organizational skills, sometimes as a result of not being organized, and sometimes just as a reflective point to continue developing on the continuum of their organization. Autonomy. So what I do is when I introduce an assignment, so let's say I'm introducing the WIN, the students like to call it Wonderful Win Wednesdays, because that year I had Wednesdays. So every single week I would schedule a time for the students to be presenting when I had a double period. And my rule is no more than 3 presenters in a day, as long as it would take for a commercial break, essentially, because students can't always engage really, really well for more than 3 presenters. So if you take about 5 minutes for each presentation, it's very little amount of class time because most of the work's being done at home. But the student says, okay, I really don't want to go first, but I don't want to go last. I need to see a few examples of the project. So they decide that, okay, Mrs. Daniel, I'd like to choose November 14th. But some other student might say, oh no, I can't, I don't know what to do. I have a dance competition November 21st. I have a lot of rehearsals, so I'm actually gonna do December 5th. So they start to own their calendar and they own their choices. So if a student says, I'm gonna do it last, and they realize that did not work for me, all I did was procrastinate, I didn't help myself by watching all the other ones, then they say to themselves through their reflection, next time I'm gonna go earlier. So there's a lot of opportunity when students choose the when of what they're gonna present, and also the how, what the content of what they're gonna present is gonna be, and all these projects lend themselves to those same things. The next aspect is community. And this is why they have to be presentations, although I've accommodated students, which I'll speak about in a minute, to help them get there. The idea is we're not just an audience, we're not just a group of students. I sit there along with the rest of the community, and the students ask questions, comments, critiques. They model and articulate the success criteria. So a student will say, that was an excellent presentation, I had no idea that you were interested in this subject. Or they would say, the next time you present, please watch your body language, it was hard to watch you swaying. And so they're simultaneously giving formative feedback, and they're figuring out the success criteria for themselves, setting themselves up for a great presentation when they go. And the community itself feels empowered, A, because they have to engage, but also because they get to have a say in how other people are doing, and it's extremely respectful, and it creates culture. So, hey, Mrs. Daniel, who's up for Wonderful Win Wednesdays, or who's got Music Mondays for History Beats, or oh, what's up, Mrs. Daniel, because it's Wednesday and it's What's Up Day. So there's a bit of cachet involved in it, a little bit of class vernacular, but it makes it fun. They're excited, and I'm excited. The last aspect of this that really helped me out was time. So class time is used really to introduce the assignment, to model exemplars, and then to have the students present, which is pretty minimal in the scheme of things. And depending on the assignment, there's some start time. But really the remainder of it is homework. And I put homework in quotation marks because this is better than homework, I think, because students are self-directing, they're planning, creating, rehearsing, revising. And if it doesn't work, then they have to do it better the next time. So it's really iterative. It gives them a chance to go through the design cycle at home and learn sometimes from mistakes and learn how to backwards design an assignment in view of a self-selected data presentation. But the role of teacher, as we talk about a lot in education today, is really one of facilitator. So I might write the agenda on the board and note who's presenting on that day, and I might facilitate the quiet in between the transitions, during the transitions for each presentation. And I need to use the data that I've collected on the student, whether it's to give formative feedback, or it's to help scaffold assignments, or it's to help that student by having a conversation or making a note that I want to use that in speaking to them about something else. That facilitation is a really important aspect. But the other aspect is I take a lot of notes. So I might take a page of notes while they're presenting, but I'll only write a few of them in their next steps because I want to make sure that they're actionable to them. Lately, in the last 6 months or so, I've been filming a lot so that students can reflect on themselves. And for T-Talk, my students actually have to give me the reflection of what their next steps are after a pitch before I give them mine. So that really helps me to be a partner in their own learning. And photographing, my mentor, as I was developing this further, and I had an article published about it, she says, "Where's your artifacts?" And I said, "I have student work." She said, "You need more artifacts." And I said, "I have reflections." And she said, "You need to be taking photographs because when you're telling the story, people are visual." So I started taking photographs, which you'll see on my blog posts, and probably does reinforce what it is that I'm speaking about. Of course, the teacher is an assessor, but I wrote as and for learning because, like the WIN, I use it at the beginning of the year as a diagnostic for where students begin in terms of their research skills and in terms of their presentation skills. Most of the BOBs are really born to be formative assessment, but in a tri-BOB situation, if you're revisiting a skill, by the time you get to that third BOB, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to evaluate it as a summative. Being an accommodator is an important feature of being the teacher in a BOB approach because there are students who are terrified about presenting in front of the class. So I've scaffolded it. So I'll take MST as an example. I had a student who was very quiet. She really did not want to present in front of the class. And so for her MST1, she presented just to me. For her MST2, I took away the nonverbal aspects from the rubric, and she presented using a video. I've never heard her be so loud and boisterous because when they're themselves, they're themselves. And so she showed the video. And so when the MST3 came, I said to her, "Okay, what kind of accommodations do you need?" And she said, "Mrs. Daniel, I'm ready to go." And she presented in the same voice she has at recess, not the one she usually has in class. So there's lots of ways you can build ramps for these assignments so every single student can be and see themselves in them. And then, of course, the term I've been using a lot lately, which is creative collaborator, because if students have ideas, they sometimes come and bounce them off of me, and I help to give them feedback or ideas of what materials to use, or talk about sometimes ideas that are just too big and need to be reined in, or too small that need to be further developed. So I'm always available to have a conversation about where students are going in their work. And the truth is that for many people, a BOB is a shift. So I've shared a lot of my projects with people and they use them, but they're not so sure about the approach. And the reason most people say they're not sure is a lot of teachers don't feel comfortable letting students choose the date of their presentation. And that's cool, because the projects, they can work. But what makes them high-yielding projects is when all four of these aspects work in tandem, because it brings out the best in students. And that's kind of what we're there to do. Really have seen kids who don't engage, who don't try, bring pieces of themselves to the classroom and look and feel whole. And that's a gift that makes me want to keep making bobs, that makes me want to talk to 10 people in a week and say, I can help you create that. I've got a bob for that job, because it means something to them and it helps students do more with much less school time. So it's very exciting. Here's the equation really quickly. Get a personalizing project. It can be mine or somebody else's. Give students a voice in what they do and when they do it. Build a community in the classroom so they're more than the sum of their parts. And be a facilitator. And you'll get engagement, deep learning, and a positive sense of self. So yeah, these are the conditions of powerful learning. I saw this on Twitter last year and it says so much. Bobs, do this. And I just wanted to tell you that I was preparing for this for Quest. I was so lucky that York Region gave me the privilege of bringing this to the world outside my school for the very first time at their November Quest conference. And I was looking at the Ontario School Effectiveness Framework in order to validate and ground the Bob approach. And I couldn't believe how many of the aspects of this goal of reaching every student Bob's actually had. So I shared that. And the truth is, the more I think about it, Bobs actually promote well-being because students feel visible and they feel whole and they feel that they matter. And the truth is, every one of my classes, even if I'm teaching 2 grade 6s, 2 7s, 2 8s, where we're doing the same Bob, History Beats looks completely different in each class because the community's different. And this incredible quote that's in the inclusion document from the province says so much. So through a Bob, you know who's in the room. And so you can create a space for everybody in the room. And inclusion has a lot of different aspects to it. But when you get to see more of a student, you get to make your space more reflective of who's there. So like I said, building outside the blocks is an approach. Personalizing projects, skill, autonomy, community, and minimal class time.